Okay, guys, let's finish up chapter 4. She's hard, that Vandera. She killed her own tyke, they say. Made him eat the oleander, they say. She sat with him and held his head till he ate it, though he didn't want to. Kira had heard this story. It was judged an accident, she reminded Matt, though she had her doubts. Other tykes have eaten the oleander. It's a danger, having a poisonous plant grow wild everywhere. They ought to pull it up, not leave it where the tykes can get at it. Matt shook his head. We be needing it there to teach us, he pointed out. Me mum, she slapped at me when I touched it. Slapped my head around so horrid I thought my neck would crack. It's how I learnt about the oleander. Well, the Council of Guardians judged Vandera and said she didn't, Kira said again. She's a hard one anyways, they say, because of that horrid wound. Pain be making her cruel. Pain made me proud, Kira thought, but she didn't say it out loud. When you be finished? Later today. We'll work on your cot. Some of my mates'll help. Thank you, Matt, Kira said. You're a good friend. He made a face, embarrassed. You be needing a cot? He turned to run off after the other boys. And you tell us the stories, after all. You be needing a place for that. Kira smiled, watching him scamper off. The bell at the top of the council edifice rang twice. She turned to re-enter the building. She was kept against the rules because her grandfather was still alive and had power, but he is long gone. Jameson read the next accusation on the list. They had allowed her to sit for the afternoon session, and they told Vandera to sit too. Kira was grateful. If Vandera had stood, she would have forced herself to ignore the pain in her leg and stand as well. Again, the guardian, who was her defender, reiterated that exceptions could be made. By now, frightening though the accusations were, the repetition was tiresome. Kira tried to stay alert. With her hand in her pocket, she fingered the small scrap of woven cloth and pictured its colors in her mind. The community cloth was drab, all no color. The formless shifts and trousers worn by the people were woven and stitched for the protection against the sudden occasional rain, thorn scratch, or poison berry. The usual village fabric was not decorated. Bakira's mother had known the art of dye. It was from her stained hands that the colored threads used for rare ornamentation were produced. The robe worn each year by the singer when he performed the Rumen song was richly embroidered. The intricate scenes on it had been there for centuries, and the robe had been worn by each singer and passed from one to the next. Once, many years before, Katrina had been asked to replace a few threads that had torn loose. Kira was only a small tyke then, but she remembered standing in the cot's shadow corner when a guardian brought the fabulous robe and waited while her mother made the small repair. She remembered watching, fascinated, as her mother pushed a bone needle with a thick, colorful thread through the fabric. Gradually, a bright gold replaced the small frayed spot on one sleeve. Then they had taken the robe away again. At that year's gathering, Kira remembered both she and her mother had peered from their seats at the stage, trying to find the repaired place as the singer moved his arms and gestures during the song. But they were too far away and the repaired spot was too small. Each year that followed, they had brought the ancient robe again to her mother for small repairs. One day my daughter will be able to do this, Katrina had said one year to the guardian. Look what she has done, she said, and showed him the scrap that Kira had just completed, the one that had composed itself so magically in her fingers. She has a skill far greater than mine. Kira had stood silently embarrassed but proud as the guardian examined the threading she had done. He made no comment, simply nodded and returned the small piece to her. But his eyes had been bright with interest, she could see. Each year following, he had asked to see her work. Kira always stood at her mother's side, never touching the fragile ancient cloth, marveling each time at the rich hues that told the history of the world. Golds and reds and browns, and here and there faded pale, almost reduced to white. There had once been blue. Her mother showed her the faded places that remained of it. Her mother did not know how to make blue. Sometimes they talked of it, Kira and Katrina, looking at the huge upturned bowl of sky above their world. If only I could make blue, her mother said. I've heard that somewhere there's a special plant. She looked out at her own garden, thick with the flowers and shoots from which she could create the golds and greens and pinks, and shook her head in yearning for the one color she could not create. Now her mother was dead. Now her mother is dead. Kira startled herself out of the daydream memory. Someone was saying those words. She made herself listen. And now her mother is dead. There is even reason to think that her mother may have carried an illness that will endanger others. And the women need the space where their cot was. There is no room for this useless girl. She can't marry. No one wants a cripple. She takes up space and food, and she causes problems with the discipline of the tykes, telling them stories, teaching them games so that they make noise and disrupt the work. It dragged on. The repetitions of Vandera's accusations were recited, and the defender again and again reiterated the amendment that said exceptions could be made. But Kira noted a change of tone. It was subtle, but she perceived a difference. Something had taken place among the Council of Guardians when the members had withdrawn during lunch. She saw Vandera shift uneasily in her seat and knew that her accuser noticed the difference too. Kira, clutching the cloth talisman in her pocket, became aware suddenly that its warmth and comfort had returned. During her infrequent leisure times, Kira often experimented with colored bits of threadings, feeling the excitement in her fingers as her surprising skill grew. She used bits of discarded woven cloth from the weaving shed. It was not a violation. She had asked permission to take the scraps to her cot. Sometimes, pleased with what she had done, she showed her work to her mother and received a proud, quick smile of approval. But more often, her efforts were disappointments, the uneven products of a girl still learning. Usually, she threw her experiments away. This one, the one she held now in the nervous fingers of her right hand, she had done as her mother lay ill. Seated helplessly by the side of the dying woman, Kira leaned forward again and again to hold a container of water to her mother's lips. She smoothed her mother's hair, rubbed her cold feet, and held the trembling hands, knowing there was nothing more she could do. While her mother slept restlessly, Kira sorted the dyed threads in her basket and began to weave them into the cloth scrap with a bone needle. It soothed her to do so, and passed the time. The threads began to sing to her, not a song of words or tones, but a pulsing, a quivering in her hands as if they had life. For the first time, her fingers did not direct the threads, but followed where they led. She was able to close her eyes and simply feel the needle move through the fabric, pulled by the urgent, vibrating threads. When her mother murmured, Kira leaned forward with the water container and moistened the dry lips. Only then did she look down at the small strip of material in her lap. It was radiant. Despite the dim light in her cot, it was night start by then. The golds and reds pulsated as if the morning sun itself had slid and twisted its rays into the cloth. The brilliant threads crisscrossed in an intricate pattern of loops and knots that Kira had never seen before, that she could not have created, that she had never known or heard described. When her mother's eyes opened for a final time, Kira held the vibrant piece of fabric so that the dying woman could see. Words were beyond Katrina by then, but she smiled. Now, secret in her hand, the cloth seemed to speak a silent, pulsing message to Kira. It told her there was a danger still, but it told her also that she was to be saved. Okay, friends, that is the end of chapter 4. We will see you next time with chapter 5. I hope you guys are having a great day. I love you all, and I miss you like crazy. Bye.